I'd like to welcome Alexander Huang, who is a prize-winning scholar of comparative literature here in town at George Washington University. Professor Huang's PhD training was at Stanford, another person who liked the West Coast experience, I assume. He received NEH funding in 2010 for a project entitled History of Modern Chinese Humor. He has also written about Shakespeare through the lens of Chinese culture and is co-director of an open-source digital project at MIT called Global Shakespeares. If you are interested at all in theater or Shakespeare, I highly recommend that you look at that website, which makes available hundreds of videos illustrating the way that different cultures have taken Shakespeare and made it their own and performed and interpreted many of the plays. I spent just a little time on it last night when I was getting ready for today. Professor Huang will share some of what he has learned from careful study and analysis of the ways in which cultures can be both connected and disconnected in our global age, and perhaps suggest how we can hone our ways of thinking about China, which is surely a culture that we need to understand today.
Thank you for that generous introduction, and thank you, Steve, for bringing me here. Needless to say, I'm very grateful to the NEH for its support of part of my work. Some people register a sense of place through sweet memories of taste and sound, others through smell, and still others through images in their mind's eye. To me, the world is made up of stories. Stories full of sound and fury. Great stories are strangers at home. They defamiliarize the everyday experience, and they make the experience strange. They then provide us something recognizable through a new language and form. So stories liberate us from the prison house of a relatively short lifespan in the infinite universe. And stories, like people, travel and move around. Stories connect us to other times and places. When Shakespeare's plays move through different cultures, they reveal unexamined assumptions about human nature and tell surprising stories of globalization. Take, for example, a slice from Hamlet's inquisitive mind. To be or not to be, that is the question. The versatile and Swiss knife-like verb, to be, is very ambiguous in English. It is ambiguous in many other languages, too. It has been translated into Russian, German, and Arabic as to do, to die, and to have. Translating this speech into Japanese in particular will require substantial rewriting because Japanese does not have the verb to be without semantic context. Working with Japanese, a language more complex than English from the sociolinguistic point of view, a translator would have to wrestle with more than 20 first and second first-person pronouns to retain the ambiguity. That ambiguity is our friend. The ambiguity is a welcome gift for the uninhibited mind, for it has been an ally for oppressed peoples in the Soviet Union, in Tibet, South Africa, Poland, and elsewhere. The ambiguity allowed them to express themselves under censorship when history has been held hostage by politics, when human rights are violated. The humanities help to restore dignity to what it means to be human. Hamlet, in a foreign language, compels us to rethink what we assume we know about our own culture. The humanities in a global context enrich our mind as we pause to ask some fundamental questions. To be whom and to do what? I was born to Taiwanese parents in a farming village in Kaohsiung and raised in Taipei. On sultry summer evenings on the subtropical island of Taiwan, my grandmother would tell me under starry skies fairy tales, her life story under Japanese colonial rule, and stories of the village, which is how I developed an insatiable appetite for stories, historical, fantastical, political, heroic. As a college student in Tsinghua, I majored in the impractical major known as literature. I was fortunate enough then to receive a scholarship to study abroad as an exchange student in Germany, where I discovered that the most frequently performed playwright was not Goethe, but William Shakespeare. As I would find out later, Shakespeare was an important figure that helped to establish a unified German culture, an identity, and a literary tradition in opposition to French classicism. I was in for a real treat because all over the world, Shakespeare has been a common cultural touchstone throughout the past centuries. My curiosity set me on a path to study cultural globalization and took me to many more countries and into many, many languages. When I visited London in 1996, work was underway to reconstruct Shakespeare's renowned Globe Theatre on the South Bank, which would open in July 1997. As some of you know, that was the project of a great American actress, Sam Wanamaker. I gleefully donated a brick to the project. In the mind of an undergraduate, that brick was a material connection to a fascinating historical space and intangible cultural heritage of a brave new world, as Miranda would say in The Tempest. Storytelling is in fact the foundation of Prospero's magic. The magician frames the world he and his daughter live in with stories that help them heal from their experience of exile and eventually forgive their enemies. The modern globe is not only a sign of cultural rebirth of London's once shady South Bank, but also a perfect example of how the humanities can lead to economic prosperity and transform communities. The humanities informed the core strategies to market London during the 2012 Olympics. Other reconstructed globe theaters are being planned in Brazil to coincide with the 2016 Olympic Games, and in China and elsewhere. Globalized art means business. Beyond economic implications, we can also learn a great deal about another culture through stories they tell. We can always learn about ourselves by comparing how another culture reads the very same story. Shakespeare's stories and stories different cultures tell about Shakespeare eventually led me to California in 1999. I earned my doctorate in comparative literature from Stanford and became a scholar of globalization. And I have obviously first-hand experience in the value of American humanities education. I believe that humanities education plants seeds for great changes in people's lives. As my students at George Washington University's Elliott School of International Affairs told me, the humanities and especially imaginary literature help them put a human face on globalization, the buzzword of our times. The humanities are not a luxury. They are the very foundation meaningful lives are built upon, which is why public support is crucial. Skills in critical thinking, civil debate, and understanding narratives are vital to American values and democracy. It is a privilege and unique responsibility to teach Shakespeare and globalization in downtown Washington, D.C., 3 blocks from the White House. My international and local students alike took pride in studying in the nation's capital. America, as a great nation, is founded upon humanistic thought, which explains why the Capitol Hill is a proud host to the Folger Shakespeare Library, the Supreme Court, and the Library of Congress. It is no coincidence that the Library of Congress, the oldest federal cultural institution in the nation, founded in 1800, is the largest library in the world, with more than 155 million items and approximately 838 miles of bookshelves. Only a great nation will have a great library. In class, my students explored many issues. For example, we looked at how Shakespeare helped to shape the American founding fathers and powerful thinkers around the world. Abraham Lincoln could recite soliloquies from Richard III. Thomas Jefferson kept a commonplace book that featured Shakespearean passages. In our age of globalization, understanding other people's stories means the difference between a window shopper and informed decision maker in the international arena. Here are 2 inspiring stories of Shakespeare in South Africa and in China. A smuggled copy of the complete works of Shakespeare inspired Nelson Mandela when he was in the Robben Island jail. The South African prisoners, his fellow prisoners, all signed their names next to passages that were important to them. The passage Mandela chose on December 16, 1977, was from Julius Caesar, just before the Roman statesman leaves for the Senate on the Ides of March. Cowards die many times before their deaths. The valiant never taste of death but once. Caesar continues, of all the wonders that I yet have heard, it seems to me more strange that men should fear, seeing that death, a necessary end, will come when it will come. Such narratives taught Mandela how to dream and to rise from the ashes. Through imaginary literature, we like Jefferson, Lincoln, and Mandela, are able to rehearse multiple scenarios and histories without having to pay for the costly consequences, we gain courage, insight, and vision. In one of my classes, I discussed with my students the impact of the joint project of National Endowment for the Arts and Department of Defense to tour the Alabama Shakespeare Festival's production of Macbeth to 13 U.S. military bases in 2004. Indeed, what does it mean to read Shakespeare, to read literature through peace and war? Great stories instruct and delight, they comfort and inspire, and Wu Ningkun has a moving story to tell as well. When the mainland Chinese intellectual returned from the U.S. to join Mao Zedong's New China, he was sent to reform himself in a labor camp during the Cultural Revolution in the 1960s because of his alleged association with the capitalist West. Under close surveillance, he had managed to smuggle in a copy of Hamlet to read whenever the prisoners had to spend the day cooped up in a cell when the blinding blizzard blew from Siberia in northeastern China. Of this experience, he later wrote, "Hamlet was my favorite Shakespearean play. Read in a Chinese labor camp, the tragedy of the Danish prince took on unexpected dimensions. The ghost thundered with a terrible chorus of 1 million victims of proletarian dictatorship. The real question I came to see was neither to be or not to be, nor whether in the minds to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, but how to be worthy of one's suffering." And that is a moving memoir. The nature of the tribulations explains, of course, the turn of the last phrase and highlights what Wu elides from speech, namely, "or to take arms against the sea of troubles and by opposing end them." Such an oppositional stance may have been unimaginable for him, given his situation. On one hand, it could mean that he wishes to counter the unfortunate condition of Cultural Revolution by not taking on a Hamlet-like passivity. On the other hand, it could imply that Wu seeks justice on a more transcendent level and is not seeking revenge upon those who unjustly imprisoned him. Shakespeare helps Wu survive the camp. And reading Wu's story helps us understand a crucial moment in the making of post-Mao China as the nation emerges from the Cultural Revolution. In short, storytelling makes us human. Thinkers such as Lincoln, Mandela, and Wu have built stronger, interconnected communities through the humanities. There will be no national security without in-depth understanding of the cultures of others and of our own. And in international affairs, stats and numbers can only give us a partial picture. Citizens who read and write well is the foundation of a democratic civil society. Many of the United States rivals today have rediscovered the importance of the humanities and are investing globally in research and teaching of humanities subjects in their campaign for soft power, another buzzword of our times. In this age of globalization, the humanities enrich businesses' creativity, enhance the workforce's adaptability, and promote crucial cross-cultural understanding through cultural diplomacy. For providing public support for the humanities in America and for allowing us to continue to discover and tell powerful stories to the next generation of Americans, you play a major role in securing the United States leadership role. For that, I thank you.